If you were to ask many Rome watchers, they would say this will be Francis's last year.
He's not in a good state of health at all.
Hey, my friends, it's like Christmas every day in America with more and more changes coming out of the new administration. We just had this week a beautiful example of that as one of the Republican representatives refused to acknowledge the fake masquerading of this guy pretending to be a woman, called him out as a man, then went onto Twitter and explained she did this because Trump called out sanity and she wasn't going to have any of the insanity back. Also, this week we have the Pope blowing up on immigration, not only in word, but also in installing people, bishops that is, who counter the Trump agenda. And that was exactly what we predicted in the last show here, where we, LifeSite, heard, Father, actually you informed us that there would be these appointments. And sure enough, it seems that's materializing. We're going to get into all of that. Also, Canada, it looks so much crazier in light of a revolution in the United States for sanity that Jordan Peterson has gone off and he's mad. Father Charles Murr, Frank Wright, so good to be with you both.
Hello again.
Always an honor and a pleasure. Thank you.
So, my friends, we had a big week with immigration. Pope Francis just swinging with a new letter, a surprise letter to all the U.S. bishops. Bishop Strickland did a really good thing where he was able to praise Trump for the good he did. Various bishops, though, in the United States, most notably just now the Wisconsin Conference, also Burbidge did, coming out saying, no, we're actually for some controls on the border. And yes, we're for migrants, but, there is illegal immigration. It should be prevented. They're quoting, by the way, John Paul II. It is quite something in America today. You're seeing this go on. Your prediction, Father, from last week coming true. That's one big thing we see. This new appointment of James Weisenberger, a totally anti-Trump. In fact, the guy is so nuts, he recommended refusing communion, even excommunicating those who would follow Trump's border policies. Your take on that, Father?
How could I say it any better? I've never heard of such a thing. I've never heard of such a thing, especially in a time when excommunication, my God, I don't know what you have to do to become, well, besides Vigano, I don't know what else you have to do to get excommunicated. Even if you try, you can hardly accomplish it. And this man was threatening excommunication for all those who were not on board with the stance of the American bishops toward immigration. It's incredible. What bothers me and bothers many, many, many Catholics around the world, especially in the United States, but around the world also, is that there seems to be only moral indignation for this one point of moral law. Unworthy reception of Holy Communion is not a problem. Marriage and married and divorce, not a problem. Homosexual marriage is not really a problem. Nothing is a problem, a moral problem, except this. And this is a social problem. It's a social justice problem more than it is a Catholic moral problem. They overlap. I understand that. It's not so cut and dry. However, it has much more to do with politics than it has to do with religion. There's no question of that. And our bishops have taken a political stance instead of a really a Catholic moral stance. If they were if they were using moral law to figure this whole thing out, it would be even interesting. But it's not. They're using politics. This is a shame. It's really a shame. Something else is a shame too, and that's the factor of money that's involved in all of this. When funding was cut off, all of a sudden we hear from our bishops as a collective body how immoral this is. Where have they been on abortion? Where have they been on all of these issues that I just mentioned and more? Silent. This, all of a sudden, is a problem.
Not only is the liberal establishment, as is, having to double down and openly announce what it stands for with this new common sense revolution, it is doubling down, and in doing so it shows what it really stands for, which is what you might call the liberal global agenda, or what the American common sense revolutionaries themselves say is a worldwide project of global social revolution. As Father Murr correctly points out, This is far more political than it is in fact Catholic. Former popes such as Pope Pius XII have said it's quite legitimate for nations to treat their differences as a sacred inheritance and guard them at all costs. These things should be uncontroversial from a Catholic point of view. They're only controversial because it appears, and it has in fact been demonstrated, that people in the Church have been paid to promote this agenda. And this is the reason why it has been promoted not just in the Church, but around the world, in places like Russia and Iran, as well as Eastern Europe, and in Britain and in Ireland, of course. In fact, where there's any traditional culture at all, whether it's the culture of the Church or the culture of a target nation. And this was basically the project of globalist regime change. That was what America used to be about. But it isn't anymore. And holdouts like the, shall we say, the synodal Catholic Church are simply going to have to defend their agenda and thereby expose what they really stand for, which isn't really Catholicism, but an agenda that really no longer belongs in the world or no longer has a place in the world because no one's going to be sponsoring it anymore.
You had mentioned Liz Yore had a neat rant on it. If you could set that up for us, Frank.
Liz Yore, who viewers will remember from this programme, came out with a startling appraisal of Pope Francis's attack, effectively, on Trumpian policies for national security. She said, "Game over, Bergoglio. No one is buying your globalist takeover propaganda. Europe is imploding over migration crime and civilization destruction." She said American Catholics aren't fooled or persuaded by your Davos, UN, Bilderberg blather. Now, Liz Yore said that on February the 11th in response to Michael Haynes of LifeSite's coverage, once again consistently excellent, I might add, about Pope Francis attacking Trump's moves against illegal immigrants and attempting to undermine J.D. Vance's citing of Ordo Amoris. Of course, Pope Francis has written a letter to all bishops, basically demanding that they do oppose these measures. And so this has led to something of a storm, and it's a storm between one view of the world and another, and it would appear that it is the Church's view, under Pope Francis, that has the least to do with the Catholic tradition.
Well, we might not be having that much more of Pope Francis in the news this week. This past week, we saw for the third time Pope Francis have to stop reading his notes. He's got bronchitis, yes, but I did a report with our LifeSite Rome correspondent Michael Haynes about all the different incidences just in the past year, half year even, that Francis has shown a very significant decline. If you were to ask many Rome watchers, they would say this will be Francis's last year. My point in all of that always is we have to pray for his conversion, more so than ever now. I believe very strongly our Lord's words, it would be better for you than you have a millstone tied about your neck than you confuse these little ones. And when he said the millstone, he was talking about throwing you in the sea. And I don't want that for anyone, let alone Pope Francis. And so we really do need to pray. I'm sorry if that's a stark way to throw it to you, Father, but go ahead.
There's another complication to add to that. He has bronchitis, and he's been afflicted with bronchitis for quite some time. He also has 1.5 lungs, which complicates the matter when you're talking bronchitis quite a bit. He's not in a good state of health at all. I'd like to praise Liz Yore. I listened to her being interviewed with Steve Bannon, and it was if you get a chance on YouTube to listen to that, you really should. She hit all of the major points. What she's actually saying is what I firmly believe. When she was talking, I'm going, yes. We have a socialist pope. It's that simple. The majority of the United States of America, and I would say Canada also, and really Europe too, coquettishly flirted with communism and socialism in the past, but I think they're waking up. And certainly the United States is not a communist nation. We have different principles, and our principles are based on the dignity of the human being and his right to own property, his right to defend himself, his right to defend his family, and the place where he lives. They're coming from different places, very different places. What Liz was saying too, I totally agree with. He's going to find himself and the bishops who are supporting him in the wrong place at the end of all of this. It's not going to be it's not going to be the Catholic Church's stance, because it's not that already, and it's not even going to be politically wise if that was his choice.
If you want to talk about decline, you could talk about the decline in the teaching of the Catholic tradition, because I'm not an expert Thomist, but apparently Edward Fazer is regarded as probably the best living scholar of St. Thomas Aquinas. And on the Pope's statement, in which he attacked J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, he said, this either contradicts traditional Catholic teaching, if the Pope rejects the notion of ordo amoris cited by J.D. Vance, or it gravely misrepresents Vance, who in fact did not say that the ordo amoris makes us mere individuals, and nor did he deny that we owe fraternity to all without exception. Now, these charges were made in a letter that was published by Massimo Fagioli from the Pope himself, and it appears to be either a grave error or a grave misrepresentation. So there's no escaping that, according to Edward Fazer, who again is regarded as the greatest living scholar of Aquinas.
Well, certainly in America, things are happening at a pace that is incredible. People are picking up. Both Homan and Vance are Catholics and speaking back with proper Catholic teaching. Homan, I remember famously pointing out that, wait a minute, the Vatican has walls, and they just made it like stiffer penalties for breaking in illegally and trying to stay there. There's a spirit in America that's moving, a spirit, you might say, of truth. What happened just last week was really beautiful. There was in Illinois, I believe, the Representative Mary Miller, who was acting speaker that day, she refused to use the proper pronoun, what's politically correct today, in introducing a transgender member. I thought that was really beautiful.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Delaware, Mr. McBride, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. When I was elected...
That's what she did. She basically introduces him properly as a gentleman, also calls him out as Mr., and then it goes on, because that is normal. He's the abnormal one in this situation. And what's really beautiful is that she responded later on Twitter, in case anybody wondered about her staying firm on that. Here's her Twitter post. Today on the House floor, I refused to deny biological reality. President Trump restored biological truth in the federal government, and I refuse to perpetuate the lie that gender is open to our interpretation. It is not. Father, in your homeland, there is a beautiful restoration of truth happening right now, and it's just awesome to see.
I listen to radio reports and YouTube every day. It is like Christmas. Somebody said it's like Christmas. This is, and we touched on this the last time we spoke, this is the revolution of common sense. It's just common sense that we're excited that a senator or a congresswoman, a woman or a congressman on the floor address somebody biologically correct sex. I mean, this is a big deal. Do you see how far we've gone from common sense?
Well, I think it's fair to say that Archbishop Vigano has been totally vindicated in his charge that there is a deep church and a deep state, and they're basically a mirror image of one another, because that's been largely demonstrated this week through the exposure of the financial networks that sponsors a lot of the globalist policies in the Vatican. Apart from that being true, and also at the same time tragic and amusing, here's something else to get cheerful about that you might have missed in a week of very good news. A state of grace. Grace appears to have returned to the highest offices of state in the United States. There was a really rather odd scandal that was whipped up earlier in the week over a young man who'd made some unfortunate comments on the internet, and the usual suspects had tried to ruin his life as a result. Now, when he was reinstated, having made what was allegedly racist remarks, J.D. Vance responded to the growing attempt to whip up a furor by denouncing the childish, spiteful behaviour of congressmen and women who are trying to ruin a young man for having said some unfortunate things on the internet. But in so doing, J.D. Vance 3 times mentioned the word grace. He first said, I grew up in a culture where people had the grace to forgive you if you made foolish mistakes when you were young. And he appealed for a state of grace instead of a kind of vengeful revolutionary spite, rather reminiscent of the Bolsheviks. So this idea of grace, it's not just a political slogan. It's not just something that he says to look good. In fact, Vance risks quite a lot by coming out in defence of this, which would formally have ruined someone's career and toxified anyone else who dared to touch it. Times have changed, and they've changed not only because of politics and slogans or even hard limits of military and economic power, but they've also changed because people in politics now, like J.D. Vance, genuinely believe in saving grace. Now, that's a remarkable change from the past.
For U.S. residents, creating a will has never been easier. Thanks to My Legacy Will, an online platform free of charge, you can now create your own will and choose to include LifeSite News in it, specify where your funeral will take place, the number of masses to be offered for your soul, and how your estate will be distributed. We would be deeply grateful if you remembered LifeSite News in your will. Visit mylegacywill.com/LifeSite News. Thank you for your support, and may God bless you.
That restoration of sanity in America is, I have to say, for Canada, where I am in, making the disparity so great that Canadians are feeling they can't stand it any longer, which is good because this is an election year for Canadians and we've got to do something very different. And you can tell how upset Canadians are by listening for a second to the famous Canadian, Jordan Peterson. He's really mad. Watch.
Enough pathetic celebrity wannabe pandering to the international elites of Davos, and for good measure, the utterly degenerate UN.
And it is true. It is true that our leaders in Canada, very much like the Biden administration, hate Canada, like Biden hated America. And others, you could say, even in the church, who hate America. But we've said that before many times. But the point is, with your leadership hating your country and doing everything in his power to destroy it and accrue power for himself and his whims, whatever they may be, you get to a point where you just say enough. And God willing, enough Canadians will say enough this year because Canada, especially now in the last few weeks, seems a place that is so barren of common sense, so done with it. I mean, that's why the appeal, when Trump said he'd make us the 51st state, his first thing was to say Trudeau would be the governor. That lost a lot of people. But all of a sudden, with this Trump revolution that's come on of common sense, with the disparity growing and growing and growing, it's sounding more and more tempting, honestly, especially if Canada still has the people willing and wanting to destroy the country in its own leadership. Frank, you're very political. What do you have to say to that?
The reason why all your governments are fake and gay is not because people like them. It's because the US aid system, if you like, has exposed the fact that these have all been sponsored. And that was basically what you would call Project Global. Now, that sponsorship is being cut off in the name of government efficiency, in the name of cutting costs. But what it's really doing is it's destroying the international network of influence that confined democracy in the West to a choice between left, right, and extreme liberals. That money supply is being cut off. Your governments have been rigged against you. Your society has been deliberately destroyed by social revolution to globalize it, to destroy any competing explanations of reality than that offered by the liberal globalist system itself. Now that has shut up shop and it's closed down. In addition to all the money being cut off that sponsored all the madness in your lives, all of it, as you will discover in the coming weeks as it's all exposed. In addition to this, how possible will it be for governments like ours in Britain or yours in Canada to survive when the choice is between ruin or restoration? Why can't we have common sense? It's a fairly reasonable request. Why can't we fix our roads and our society, and why can't we have borders and safety and security and sanity instead of endless waste to sponsor civilizational destruction and madness? This is a simple existential choice, and the most dangerous thing of all in democratic politics is to have ordinary people interested in it in a way they can understand. That's fatal to any government, because they all rely, usually, on people being too bored or distracted or confused to understand what's going on. Everybody can now see that the choice is between having their lives wrecked or having them repaired, having a decent future for their kids or practically none at all. And everyone is now beginning to realise that everything has been rigged against them by people who stole their own money to pay to do so. That's an outrage. This system can't survive, all the outposts will fall, and the more they try and defend this rotten system, the worse they're going to look. It's the end.
I guess I was believing for a long time that all of this, the trans talk and the trans wave and the gay this and the gay that, in all of these countries all over the world, was spontaneous, was happening on its own. It had all of a sudden, with the money being cut off, I see how much we have been sponsoring all of this, paying for it. This is incredible. This is absolutely incredible. So I think this is a marvelous thing. It's a marvelous thing. As marvelous as it will be, I hope. I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I really wish our Catholic bishops of the United States would become unfunded by the government. I really wish that happens, so we can get back to Catholic questions of religion, of theology, of philosophy, and things that are real, that things that pertain to the church, because we have not been there for years. This social justice, I was going to say nonsense. It's not nonsense. Well, you understand what I'm saying. Certainly social justice has a place in Catholicism, and we stand up for the rights of individuals, and for everyone. However, that's not what religion is all about. It's much more, and that's what we've focused on completely, and that's because that's where the money is. The gay revolution or the trans revolution happening all over the world? No, it's not. No, it's not. Take away the money and just see what happens. Defund, and you'll see what happens. So these are great times. These are great times to be alive, because a lot of things are happening, and up until now, all for the best. God willing, they continue that way. This is remarkable. It's wonderful. It's really wonderful.
It seems so much of this show has been good news, and we always save the good news for the end, but even on Super Bowl Sunday, there were good news at the halftime show, which is usually crazy. But one of the ads on the Super Bowl this year was a very pro-life ad. Watch this.
Let's get you home. Almost heaven. West Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountains, Shenandoah River. Life is older than the trees, younger than the mountains, growing like a breeze.
That's your boy? Yeah, I can't wait to get there, man.
Country roads, take me home to the place I take me home, country roads.
Isn't that gorgeous? Just basically, it's the hope of life. But to start it off with a pregnant baby and make that the hope of life, I mean, with a baby in utero still, and saying that's the hope of life, that's just beautiful. There is a revolution for common sense happening in America right now. It's being recognized everywhere. There are a lot of people who are upset about it, I'm sure. Hopefully it sparks in the mass of humanity, particularly in Canada and Europe, some recognition of, hey, we need to do something similar so that we can have our country, our towns, our cities back. Father, thank you so very much. Frank, thank you. Father, I'm going to ask you to give us your blessing in closing.
Certainly. Dominus vobiscum et cum spiritu tuo. Benedictio Dei omnipotentis, Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, descendit super vos et manet semper. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Aloha, everyone. This is Jason Jones for LifeSite News. We hope you enjoyed this video. For more content like this, check the link in the description. You can also connect with us on social media to stay up to date with the latest news on life, faith, family, and freedom. Thanks for watching, and may God bless you.